So my talk is dukkha and the disadvantages of samsara. So in a way, it's dukkha is the disadvantage of samsara, is the disadvantage that if we go round and round in conditioned existence, lacking what Artapriya has just been telling us about, our practice, there is dukkha, but there's dukkha anyway. And my talk is going to bring out 3 different types of dukkha. And it's a personal talk. So I've actually called it See Samsara and Lost in Samsara. And I was very appreciative of Subhuti's talk yesterday. Many aspects, but one particular thing was that he talked about the importance of building our spiritual life on our foundation of what kind of originally sort of inspired us, making sure that the spiritual life we're leading is based on that initial inspiration. So when I was 3, my mother died. So straight off, I experienced suffering of loss and separation. The first type of dukkha is the basic dukkha that we all experience. The suffering that comes from old age, from sickness, illness, and the suffering from death, whether it's our own death or others, through loss and separation. So it's a basic suffering. And this led to sort of 2 sides of my sort of being. One, I was a very insecure child, very, very self-conscious, and sort of didn't want to be seen, and quite unconfident in a worldly way. The other side was that I knew about death. I knew actually about, Subhuti talked about this as well, sort of an intuition that the most important thing in life was sort of to find the answers to life, to find the sort of the meaning behind life. So I grew up with this sort of inner intuition that strangely made me feel inferior. So I felt, strangely made me feel superior. So in the other side, I felt inferior, like very unconfident. But I felt this superiority because I knew about this thing. So I was the sort of child who liked songs like, ooh, ooh, ah, ah, where will we all be 100 years from now? So I liked reflecting on that. I actually liked visiting my mother's grave, sort of running down the hill with a bunch of daffodils, because I was sort of connected with the most important thing to me, not only that I'd lost her, but to sort of find the answers. So I grew up with quite idealistic, very idealistic actually. And I kind of worked out, I didn't like inequality. I couldn't understand, you know, how people could be content seeing inequality in the world. So so I decided the most important thing was education. So I went into teaching. And one of the first things that I did was voluntary service overseas. And I went to Nigeria. But before I went, I was 21 and my mother, there'd been a trust left and there was some money for me. And my poor old dad was in hospital with gallstones. And I told him that I couldn't go off to Nigeria with this stash of money in the bank. And he somehow managed to sort of talk me round and not give it all away. And so it stayed in the bank, and I went off to do my VSO. However, about just before I came to the end of the first year, I got dysentery. And I found myself in this tiny little medical center. It was more like a hut on the edge of the Sahara Desert. I was totally alone with a drip in my arm. And I felt incredibly insecure, incredibly lonely. And actually, I couldn't manage to get well. So I came back. I had to come back early. And so I swung from sort of my idealism, as it were, into looking for security. And the only way that the only example I had at that point of sort of security and sort of love and closeness was, so I bought a flat. I got a job as a teacher in East London, an inner city school. And then the next task, of course, was to get in a relationship. So I went right into the rounds of samsara. It kind of worked for a while, but soon the cracks started to show. One of the difficult things for me were, first of all, I had to come out. I wasn't attracted to the opposite gender, so I had to come out as gay and sort of find, that was really, really scary. I thought, well, that will sort out all my problems, you know, if I, you know, find the right woman, sort of thing. So anyway, 3 years into this life where I had all those things that you kind of think are going to, well, I thought were going to sort of sort me out. I had them all. It all started falling apart. And actually I was pretty unhappy because I had forgotten that, that kind of deeper inner knowing of what my life was really about. So this is the second type of dukkha. The second type of dukkha is suffering from change for the worst. So we've got impermanence, you know, there's great things about impermanence, but the suffering is suffering for change for the worse. And change for the worse was the relationship was going downhill. I was in a school where it was very hard for me to communicate, do my education bit, because I couldn't control the class. And later on, my flat ended up having subsidence. So in a way, the whole thing fell apart. Luckily, so I'm 27 at this point. Luckily, in my misery, and it literally was, a friend gave me a leaflet about Tara Loka Retreat Centre, which is the International Women's Retreat Centre in Shropshire. So off I go, and yes, what a relief. So Subhuti mentioned that as well, a relief. What I saw, not only did I sort of hear the Dharma, and that kind of really resonated with who I really was, I connected with the Buddha, but what I saw was people living and working together. They were actually living the life that was kind of their whole being. So it took me 3 years to sort of disentangle the life that I was in. And so by the time I was 30, I became a mitra, and I started working in the evolution shop in Bethnal Green. So not the Ipswich one, I was in Bethnal Green for 6 years, evolution shop. And soon after, I lived in a community. So I completely changed my life around. However, there's a slight problem, because whatever lifestyle you lead, you take your habits and tendencies with you. So that insecure, unconfident woman had many habits around that. So, yeah, I was at the evolution shop, and after about 2 or 3 years, I was the only, I was like the longest standing person. So I had the most experience. I loved the work, I liked teamwork, and I loved the friendships. But I had put a lot of myself into managing. I wasn't the manager, but I sort of took on a sort of manager role. And I was a bit, I was probably, you know, a bit sort of bossy, quite organizational. And this woman came and joined the team, who I wasn't the only one who found her difficult. So, but she had her own ideas of how you did things. And I was totally stuck in how things should be done at Evolution. And I'd been up to Cambridge, done lots of training, and we were at loggerheads. It was very, very difficult. And this was probably from about, I'd been there 4 or 5 years by then. So this, I'm pointing towards the third type of dukkha. The word dukkha actually means means bad or wrong, and ka is wheel. It comes from the word wheel. So you put the two together and it's like a bad fitting wheel. It's like a bumpy ride. So I was in a bumpy ride again, but I was immersed in spiritual life. So I'd done the bumpy ride in samsara, and now I was bumpy ride again. But this bumpy ride was particularly because I had appropriated the sort of role I was in at Evolution. It was like, I know how things should be done. And also, it was very important to me that I did a good job, because that gave me confidence. So my whole sort of being was taken up in a way with a self project. It wasn't selfless. And I would come up against this woman at regular intervals. So some order members came in to try and sort us out. We were all mitras at that point. But the person who sorted it out for me was Amitabha. So he appeared in a dream, and he appeared on the ocean, and he basically said, "You're hurting her." I'd never ever thought about it from her point of view. And it completely kind of shocked me that I thought I was doing the right thing for Evolution, but that was me doing the right thing for Evolution. But there was another person at the other side of this slightly organized and bossy person who maybe was being hurt. So this third type of dukkha is sometimes called the existential dukkha. It's just, we've all got it. We're working with I at the center, and we're trying to move towards less selfishness. And so my path then for the next couple of years until I got ordained, I actually moved business because I couldn't sort it out in Evolution, was to sort of really learn more how to work in a team and let go of this need to sort of be a bit like the boss, to be boss. So I'm going to just end with 2 words from Bhante. And the first word is cherish. Now, at Friends Night, we've been exploring Dado's motto, which is cherish the Dharma. Cherish, meaning nurture, look after, bring into being, get interested in. But Bante's, this quote that I just found was cherish unsatisfactoriness. So when all the deck chairs will not fit in a row, instead of being interested in getting them back, sorting them out and getting them into a row, actually cherish the fact there is unsatisfactoriness. We can start looking into the nature of samsara and looking into the nature of mind. Because all our minds, when we start meditating, we're looking into our minds, we see that actually we're trying to get pleasure all the time and push away what we don't like. So start seeing that it's not just about getting pleasure. It's about going a bit deeper and seeing that this push-pull of just pushing away unpleasant and going for pleasure. We're going to go beyond that. And so we need to look into that sort of our unsatisfactory situation of our mind. So I'll just end with those 2 words. Well, in fact, I'll end with the 4 words. Because they link. Cherish unsatisfactoriness. Cherish the doctrine.